H.H. Holmes, also known as Dr. Henry Howard Holmes and Herman Webster Mudgett, was born on May 16, 1861, in Gilmanton, New Hampshire. He was born to an affluent family and had a privileged childhood, but he appeared to be unusually intelligent at an early age. Holmes ended up graduating high school at age 16, but yet there were still haunting signs of what was to come. Holmes expressed an interest in medicine, which reportedly led him to practice surgery on animals like cats and dogs. In 1878, he married his first wife, whom he abandoned at age 18 with a child. Dr. Holmes graduated middle school at the University of Michigan, located in Ann Arbor, in 1884 at age 24. While studying medicine at the university, he would steal corpses, render them unrecognizable with acid, and then collect on the life insurance policies he had previously taken out under their fictitious names. Herman had gotten away with several of these frauds before a night watchman had caught him removing a corpse. For this, he was kicked out of the university for unusual activities. In 1886, Holmes moved to Englewood, Illinois, in Chicago after abandoning his wife and committing a variety of felonies. He even defrauded one of his own in-laws. Herman was known as a swindler and decided it was time for a new lease on life. That's when he took on the alias Henry Howard Holmes. Holmes eventually amassed a nice fortune through his frauds and schemes, using multiple aliases and often failing to follow through on payments for his many deals arranged on credit and with work performed by unpaid laborers. In early 1887, Holmes soon wedded Myrta Z. Belknap, but without finalizing his initiated divorce with Clara, his first wife. Through this marriage, Holmes was able to exploit the wealth of Myrta's great-uncle. In the spring of 1888, Myrta became pregnant with their daughter, Lucy, and that summer, her parents followed the couple back to the Chicago area, where they then lived with Holmes and Myrta on John Street in Wilmette, in a house that Holmes built through contractors and workers that he also defrauded and never paid. Within a year, Holmes had left Myrta and Lucy in the Wilmette home with the parents, and his visits to the home became increasingly rare. In 1888, Holmes was hired as a chemist at a popular drugstore located on the northwest corner of 63rd and Wallace, in the later annexed suburb of Englewood, on the south side of Chicago. In 1888, Holmes also bought a vacant lot across Wallace from the pharmacy business and began to build a hotel which took up the whole block. Holmes later named his building the World's Fair Hotel in his bid to capitalize on and exploit travelers to the nearby upcoming 1893 Chicago Exposition. Holmes' massive and unconventional building became known to the neighborhood as the Castle. During construction, Holmes changed contractors several times and shuffled the workers around frequently so that no one was ever able to get a clear idea of the floor plan of what the building was actually going to be for. Most of the rooms had gas vents that could let off lethal or sleeping-induced gases The vents could only be controlled from a closet in Holmes' bedroom. Many of the rooms were soundproof and could not be unlocked from the inside. It was a 3-story building with shops on the first floor and a bizarre labyrinth of windowless rooms, false floors, secret passages, trapdoors, a well-equipped surgery area, as well as several instruments of torture such as a laticity determinator, a contraption he claimed could stretch experimental subjects to twice the normal length. Those who viewed it said it appeared to be a medieval torture rack. A few rooms were lined with asbestos, and the place was filled with doors that opened to brick walls, stairways to nowhere, and an elevator with a shaft and a shaft without an elevator. There was an airtight and soundproof vault, human-sized grease chutes, leading from the living quarters to the cellar. The bedroom had peepholes and were equipped with asphyxiating gas pipes. Connected to a control panel in Dr. Holmes' closet, home was nothing if not through. In 1890, the proprietress of the drugstore across Wallace from the hotel, an elderly widow, mysteriously disappeared. Holmes quickly took over the business and began selling patent medicines of his own invention by mail order, including fake cures for alcoholism. Upon completion of the castle, Holmes soon tapped into a city water line in his cellar, mixed the water with vanilla, and sold it for 5 cents a glass as an elixir called Linden Grove Mineral Water. He was eventually caught, but no charges were ever filed. On another occasion, he purchased a huge safe on credit, then moved it into his castle. He built a room around it with only a tiny exit. When creditors eventually came to haul it away, humorously they couldn't get it out. In this period, on a visit to Boston, Holmes met Minnie R. Williams, a wealthy but rather plain young woman. She was flattered by Holmes' attentions, and he was no doubt scheming after her wealth. Since he had always otherwise involved himself with quite attractive women, Holmes, being a classic psychopath, was skilled at manipulation of people around him, and his superficial charm would often win over whatever initial skepticism he faced. Once people were drawn into his presence, basically. Minnie and her young sister Anna Williams had been orphaned while young, and they were raised by various uncles in their home state of Mississippi. In early 1893, Minnie followed Holmes to Chicago, and it was known through Minnie's letters that they became engaged that April. No clue there. But they quickly married soon after, where Holmes then convinced Minnie to have a small ceremony with no family members and only a preacher present. But Holmes was still legally married to both Clara and Myrta. There is no record of this marriage in the Cook County registers, but it probably occurred in late April or early May. Minnie had always known Holmes in Boston by his alias of Henry Gordon. He informed her that for business reasons, people in Chicago also knew him by an alias of H.H. Holmes, and that she should not show surprise when she was presented by the Holmes name in his affairs, and that she should not reveal his true name of Henry Gordon to anybody in Chicago as well. After a short time of living with Minnie in the castle on the south side, Holmes found her presence there to be too close to his nefarious activities there, which were likely wrapping up to the upcoming opening of the fair. So on June 1st, 1893, Holmes and Minnie moved all the way across town to the north side, which took a flat at 1220 Wrightwood Avenue. Minnie remained in residence there while Holmes conducted daily operations across town at the castle. Minnie had written her sister Anna in Texas, and Anna soon joined the couple at the Wrightwood flat. During that month, they attended the newly opened fair. On July 5th, 1893, under the pretext of showing the castle to Anna, Holmes lured her to the building. It was likely at a time where the building was empty of residents who would have been out enjoying the fair. Later that same day, Holmes also summoned Minnie from the Wrightwood flat to the south side building. Neither sister was ever seen again. Shocker there. Holmes disposed of their traveling trunks and their belongings, sending articles off in various directions, and he complicated the trail with stories about the sisters traveling east and relocated in Europe. 2 bodies later, unearthed from a pit in the basement, were thought to be their remains. During the Great Chicago World Fair in that summer of 1893, the entrance to which was only a few blocks from the Holmes establishment, when the city filled with visitors. Holmes would rent rooms and or lure girls and young ladies to his castle, where he would attempt to seduce them before drugging them. They were then popped into one of the empty shafts that ran through the building. The helpless girls would come round only to find themselves trapped behind a glass panel in an airtight death chamber into which Holmes would pump the lethal gas. Afterwards, the body would be sent down a chute to the basement, which contained vats of acid and lime, and in the center of the room, a discreting table. Mudger would cut up the corpses, removing particular organs which took his fancy, and dispose of the remains in the vats. After killing them, Holmes would sometimes sell the bleached skeletons to medical universities. In 1894, Holmes wedded Georgina Yoke, again not bothering to divorce his previous wives. His charm and good looks wooed countless women and enhanced his talents as a schemer. Only one man knew the truth of what was going on in the castle. Herman Pitzel, Holmes' lackey and accomplice. A weak man, Pitzel was easily controlled by Holmes. Despite his cleverness, though Holmes was going broke. He knew his Chicago gig was almost up. In desperation, Holmes murdered 2 visiting Texan sisters, and rather than quickly disposing of their remains, he set fire to their house in an attempt to get the insurance money. The insurance company refused to pay, and the police began an investigation into the blaze. Strangely, the police work was not pursued vigorously enough to produce evidence of Holmes' bloody activities. But the killer did not know any of that, and so he fled. Soon, Holmes turned up in Texas, where he traced relatives of the sisters he had murdered. Having integrated himself with them, he tried to swindle them out of a $60,000 fortune. They were suspicious, so he again took to the road, but this time on a stolen horse. Police caught up with him in Missouri, where using the name H.M. Howard, he was charged with further fraud attempt. With the help of a crooked lawyer, he was granted bail and promptly left town. Holmes next turned up in Philadelphia, where he concocted an elaborate scheme. Herman Pitzel took out a life insurance policy on himself for $10,000 with Holmes and a beneficiary. The plan was that Pitzel would disappear to Philadelphia and Holmes would produce a false corpse, identified as Pitzel's, and share the payoff with Pitzel's family. But instead, Holmes burned his pal alive in Philadelphia and collected the money. But someone tipped off the police about the scheme, and Holmes fled with the Pitzel's eldest daughter. Telling Mrs. Pitzel that her husband was hiding in a nearby city, Holmes convinced her to follow him, and for months the trio moved separately and together around the United States and Canada, taking the 4 other Pitzel's children with them. During the group's wanderings, Herman Pitzel's body was discovered near Indianapolis, and Holmes killed 3 of the 5 Pitzel's children. The bodies of Alice and Nellie Pitzel were found in a cellar in Toronto. The girls had been stuffed into a trunk and gassed. Now there are 3 versions as to how the police caught up with Holmes. The first is that detectives traced Mudgett through his mother, who told them the whereabouts of her son. The second is that while jailed in Missouri, Holmes shared a cell with the infamous train robber, Marion C. Hedgepeth, the handsome bandit. Perhaps wanting to brag about his own criminal prowess, Dr. Holmes told Mr. Hedgepeth about the Pitzel scam, and Hedgepeth squealed. And the third is that, aided by Mrs. Pitzel, the police captured Holmes. At any rate, Holmes was charged with murder. The police searched Holmes' place in Chicago, and numerous human fragments, including several complete skeletons, were discovered throughout the premises. On August 19, 1895, not long after the authorities began inspecting and uncovering the evidence hidden and buried inside the castle, the massive structure was burned down to the ground in what was suspected to be an arson by persons unknown, perhaps in an attempt to hinder the investigation. No arrests from that incident were ever made. Holmes continued to protest his innocence loudly. Holmes pleaded not guilty to killing Pitzel, and his trial began on October 28, 1895. Holmes fired his lawyers and questioned the prospective jurors himself. Nonetheless, he was convicted in the trial of the century of first-degree murder on November 4th, 1895, and sentenced to death. He quickly became known throughout the land as Holmes, the arch fiend. I was born with the devil in me. I couldn't help the fact that I was a murderer, no more than a poet can help the inspiration to sing. In 1896, while awaiting execution, Holmes received an offer from the Hearst newspaper syndicate to write a confession. In the confession, Holmes claimed to have killed 27 people. Investigators could neither confirm nor disprove Holmes' assertion because the contents of the iron tanks and crematory, although recognizably human remains, could not be differentiated. Holmes later recanted his confession, and several people he had claimed to have murdered turned up alive. The confession is a mixture of truth and falsehood. Holmes never could help lying, said George Graham, Philadelphia's district attorney at the time. On May 7, 1896, at Philadelphia's Moyamensing prison, as he stood with his head in the hangman's noose, Holmes loudly exclaimed, "As God is my witness, I was responsible for the death of only 2 women. I didn't kill Minnie Williams. Minnie killed, but at that moment, the trap door sprung, and Herman Webster Mudgett, also known as Henry Holmes, died before death. Holmes had repeatedly refused requests for donation of his own brain to science, and he was greatly concerned about the prospect that his corpse would be disgraded due to his notoriety, so he made extreme arrangements for his own burial. His body was placed in an oversized coffin in a bed of wet concrete. The coffin was then filled with concrete over his body. The heavy coffin was then transported to Holy Cross Cemetery, which it was in turn placed into a deep concrete-filled double grave, noted in the cemetery records as Sector 15, Range 10, Lot 41, Graves 3 and 4. Then the entire grave and coffin was covered in what the records described as 10 feet of cement. No memorial stone marks the site, which now sits as an open grassy area among other nearby marked graves. Upon his death, the New York Times reflected, "It takes a very convinced opponent of capital punishment to maintain that any better disappointment could have been made of the wretched Holmes." Believers of superstition may wish to note that not only was there the death of a sitting jury member during the trial, but that within a few years of Holmes' execution, a great number of people associated with the case, prison officials, lawyers, and relatives, died suddenly, some of them under unexplained circumstances. The Holmes crime of the century was also the subject of the Holmes Pencils case, a true detective story published in 1896 in Philadelphia by the permission of the district attorney and the mayor. Just how many people Herman Webster Mudgett killed, truly murdered, is unknown, for it is a secret he took with him to his grave, and we will never be certain of exactly how many people lost their lives in the murder castle. Holmes, the Devil in the White City.
Ha 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 ha!